Steven Simcox alongside. And Steven, the national letter of intent is no more.
Saw this, yes.
Yes. So because the rules have been changing and changing and changing, it will now be replaced with a financial aid agreement and a revenue sharing contract. That is the plan moving forward for when revenue sharing gets approved, which will be in April. So the national letter of intent, go bye-bye.
Pretty wild. I mean, I guess it might not change things as much as people think, because what we learned in the past few years is, I mean, they mattered, but they didn't. Like, people would just ask out of them, and the school kind of had to grant that unless they wanted a PR mess on their hands. But just another example of how we're barreling towards essentially professional football. And I think it's going to be good for schools in a lot of ways, because it'll get more regulation in place. It'll have things more above board, but there's also just going to be a ton of adjustments for fans, and it makes recruiting even more kind of wishy-washy in some ways. But, you know, I mean, Paul, you've been doing this long enough. Like, commitments, all these things, they don't really mean, like, it doesn't mean anything until somebody's on campus, essentially.
I wonder how long before they, with revenue sharing and everything, turn it over to, you know, like a general manager, recruiter type person, and the head coach is going to be involved in that, and then the position coaches may be less involved until you, like, thin the herd a little bit. Because I think recruiting is what is making it harder. They need to find a way to simplify it. And I thought that, like, college football coach and NFL coach were, like, the same kind of difficult, like, were the same level of difficult.
Just different.
But just different
challenges.
Different challenges. I do not believe that as it currently stands. Like, I think an NFL job is remarkably easier than a college job right now, because
it definitely is.
If you're the wide receivers coach of the Lions, like, you have scouts that go out and tell you things, and then you watch things and you say, hey, I like this kid from Minnesota. Can you, like, let me know about him? But you don't have to go to the kid from Minnesota at all. Like, you don't have to go and try to convince him to be a Lion. You don't have to do that. When you have free agents, you don't really do that either, unless you have a pre-existing relationship with a guy, you're the offensive coordinator, and he played for you in Denver, and now you're in Atlanta, and you're like, hey, I bet he knows the system. We should go and get him. We have a good relationship. And you might be like, you know, call him up. Hey, Steven, you want to come to Atlanta? Yeah, well, you know, have your agent set up a visit. Like, that's all you have to do. You don't have to, like, go and meet his parents and, you know, go talk to the coach and, you know, do all these things. Like, the general manager will take care of taking him to a, you know, $500 a plate steakhouse and all those things. And
you're not recruiting players on your own roster constantly.
No.
I mean, if everybody has contracts, as you said, there's free agents, but a lot of times you kind of know the deal going into a contract year. Like, hey, I got this guy. Yeah. He's probably gonna be really motivated. There's a chance we lose him in the offseason. And if there's a holdout or something like that, front office takes care of it. Front office and the agent take care of it. And you just know, well, 9 times out of 10, these things get resolved, and he'll probably be there by the time games roll around, right? So it's a really difficult job, and it makes things immensely tougher. And I remember, it's funny that you mentioned general managers. I remember when we were working together, we had Austin Thomas on the show one time, and he was like I think at that time he was the GM at Baylor.
Yeah.
And we talked to him, and we hung up and everything. And I remember thinking to myself, this dude's just stealing money. Like, he just made up it sounded like he just made up a job.
Yeah.
Because at that time it was still very new, and nobody really knew, like, what they were supposed to do. His description of it was kind of like, well, basically whatever the head coach doesn't want to deal with, I kind of handle that. But now, it's a hugely important part of the gig, because there's so much scouting and player retention and everything that goes into this that's outside of, it's in the coach's purview, but it's outside his ability to handle it all.
Honestly, like, if I were, like, I would have your football coaches and your recruiters, and then have the recruiters go recruit. They're going to have relationships, and then make sure that those position coaches are good, like,
are communicating
and all that stuff. Have them have relationships. But I would have the football coaches focus on the football, because, you know, it's also really a lot easier to tell, to me, in the NFL, when you have a position that's, like, constantly bad for 5 years in a row, where you're like, well, I mean, if like sometimes you have a position that's constantly bad in college, and you're like, well, we're not losing this guy as a recruiter. We'll just deal with the fact that we're really good, but our safeties never seem to like make plays, right? But he's the reason we have this quarterback, and he's the reason we have this great offensive line. He's just not so good. Or we'll move him somewhere. We'll just bend him over into a different role.
Suddenly he's the running backs coach.
Yeah, like he's going to be here, so it's not like such a big deal. But when it comes to like the NFL, if your safeties are bad for 5 years in a row, it's on two people. It's the general manager and it's the safeties coach. Yeah. Like, and we probably need a better position coach who can help the general manager identify the talent a little bit better. And when we get these guys in here, like, make them good.
I can see a world where that happens. I mean, typically you have like 2 or 3 guys and maybe a couple more that are their job's recruiting. But I think that's going to become more specialized. I guess the only tricky part of it is a lot of times that's like a get your foot in the door type of gig.
Yeah.
And those coaches are hoping like, okay, if I do good at this, maybe they'll let me coach the corners in 2 years. And now it's like such an important aspect of it that you could make a living just doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, like Rashad Samples, I think he knows ball too, but he's bounced around all over the nation the last few years because he's just known as he's got great relationships. His dad coached at Duncanville. Like he's just a recruiting guy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I think that's going to change a lot. The other change is the spring portal's still here, but the windows are tighter, which I think makes it easier on everybody. I'm all for player rights and advocacy and all that stuff, but also, like, let's make a decision. Like, let's not draw this stuff out.
There have to be some rules.
Yeah, there have to be, like, make a decision. Like, don't – yeah.
If
like,
you're in the portal,
I don't want it, like – I just need to hear, like, part of Beethoven's Fifth, not the whole thing. I just need a measure, not the whole symphony.
I mean, also, if you're in the portal and you're in demand, like, you should have 3 or 4 schools in mind. It shouldn't be like, here's my top 20 or whatever. You know, I mean, like, you should know – this is where I think I would fit. Yeah. And maybe you have more in mind, but based on who reaches out to you, you narrow it down. Like, it should be a pretty quick decision.
Yeah.
Especially with all the tampering happening.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think most of Riley Leonard, they have the do not contact, thing. Riley Leonard had a do not contact because
he knew he
was going to go to Notre Dame.
Right.
Like that's where he wanted to go. And, obviously like he put his thing in the portal, put his name do not contact, and you can change that. It's not like you can't. So like if he had called Notre Dame, they're like, nah, we don't want you. He'd be like, no, seriously, contact me. I've made a huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake, yeah.
I've made a huge mistake.
Just kidding, guys. I was playing hard to get. I read one of those dating books.
Yeah.
And I heard this was the way to go.
Yeah. They didn't call, so
apparently this is not. Steve Harvey led me astray again.
Yeah. I like the one thing I would love to see about the portal is let's get it right. Let's get it, let's make sure that, we have a system that works. So, yeah. I can hear you guys, by the way.
Yeah, the portal's a tricky thing. I mean, I think I don't know. Do you feel like it's helped the popularity of the sport?
Yes, I do. Because I think it's made people like it's created interest in the off season where college football used to have an off season.
Yes.
The NFL doesn't have a real off season.
Not anymore, no.
No. And so like the NFL schedules it out though. Like theirs is scheduled out. So you have the playoffs. When the playoffs are over, you have the combine. When the combine is over, you have free agency. When free agency is over, you have the draft. When the draft is over, you have mini camps. When mini camps are over, you have regular camp. And then when regular camp's over, the season starts.
Got the season, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this all big cycle. If college football wants to like make a good work-life balance, they need to figure those things out. And they like the biggest problem is them admitting that this is what they are now. Like when you're going to be sharing millions of dollars of revenue with athletes, like yes, they are student athletes, but they're also professionals now, just at a different level of it.
Right.
And Jack and I talked at length yesterday on the show about, how, European soccer works and there's levels. Like, this is the championship league. It's not the NFL. Like, it's really good, or maybe it's League One or whatever, but, like, this is League One, and then they're going to go eventually, like, you're going to be, developed, and you're going to go up to the top level. But it's not pretend like there's only one way to be a professional athlete, because there's things all over the world that dictate that that's not true.
They're not studying all the time, Paul?
Look, the minute I remember when I heard Johnny Manziel and, like, they justified it, like, look, he's too famous to go to class. You're like, all right, look, the thing is like, that's a first day type thing, like first week type thing. But when I'm in my meteorology class and it's the 30th time and Johnny Manziel's in there, I'm not going to care.
I'm not still passing out. Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, oh my God, he's here. Yeah. So, like, the all online classes thing, like that kind of ended that for me for certain guys. Now, look, there are most student athletes still are trying to get their degree because they know they're not going to be professional athletes, or at least they know there's a really good chance they're not going to be for very long,
But it's more and more difficult. Like, you have to really go after it yourself and push for it, because with the time demands, like, it's just really tough to balance it all. And people are not going to be encouraging you to, like, hey, you want to go pre-med? Like, nobody's saying that. They're saying, hey, here's the easiest things you can do to maintain eligibility, still play. So it's a tough dynamic. It's also funny, Paul, every time the NCAA kind of jumps in with some new regulations, because you're just like, oh, yeah, you guys still exist.
Yeah. Oh, no, we did something. We're still here.
Yeah, we're still in charge. That's right.
Yeah.
People have told me that.
For now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ross Dellinger had an article yesterday about Super League, and the NCAA's like, hey, here's some new rules we got.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. You guys are sweet. Thanks. Yeah, no, that...
Glad you guys had a meeting.
Yeah.
Solid.
Do you think that, like, occasionally somebody, like, just comes by the NCAA offices and is like, how much you want for this building? Like, what do you mean? Like, you guys don't... Do you need these offices anymore?
Come on, guys.
Haven't you,
You could work remote for the next 6 months.
Yeah, like, why don't you cut me a deal? What do you want here?
You can put together a soccer tournament matrix from your house.
Yeah, we don't need this. I've got a WeWork that wants to come in here.
Big time startup. Want a lot of open rooms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of kind of the letter of intent thing specifically. I've seen a lot of kind of gnashing of teeth today. But do you think this changes a whole lot?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because that was my first thought. I just saw people be like, well, here we go. This is another example. And I'm like, well, I mean, we're kind of already there, guys.
Hay's out of the barn, man. Like, I think a lot of people are just, they don't want to let go of the past.
I get it.
So, I mean, it's why we had 3 Star Wars sequels that, really just kind of stayed stuck in one spot. So
I still have radios in our cars.
It's what, listen, I'll tell you, if you're a big AM radio fan, just like start adjusting.
I saw people were calling. I was listening the other day, and people were saying, hey, you need to text your congressman because it's happening.
Yeah. Well, it's not like, what the congressman going to say? It's like, oh, yeah, Verizon has more money than you. So
all fiddlesticks.
So there you go. Like, it's going away. The more cell phone towers and the more wireless that we do, they're just going to give away those frequencies. So
RIP.
Yeah. FM radio also, like, not so much in danger, but
it's on the way. Yeah.
It's on the way. Like, it's all going to be digital eventually and satellite based and all that stuff. And those towers will be replaced with wireless antenna. So that's where it's going to go. So if you like the old school radio,
good luck.
Yeah. Hey Boomer or whatever it is, like Okay Boomer.
Okay Boomer, that's what it is.
Wow, I even messed up that. Okay Boomer.
Hey Boomer. Paul thought it was something about the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah. Listen, these darn kids and their darn radios. Their bag phones and whatnot.
Yeah, they're taking our radios away.
That's right. When we come back, the wheel.